Mr. Kwame Dankwa, judging from the work Harakati Muungano is doing in Africa, why do you promote minority inclusive model for African countries and African people?
I have been asked this question a couple of times. The minority inclusive model is a constitutional proposal that compels the president and the majority party that won the elections to appoint from the president's party some executive ministers, executive appointees, and government functionaries whose total number in percentage terms shall be less than or equal to the percentage of the electoral vote percentage received by the president in the general elections. Under the minority inclusive model, the president shall appoint the remaining ministers, executive officials, and government functionaries from political parties that are different from the president's party or from individuals who do not belong to the president's party. The minority inclusive model can also apply to the legislators of parliament, under which the constituency dual representation model shall apply. For any two candidates who shall receive the highest number of electoral votes cast and the second highest number of electoral votes cast in a constituency election to the legislature, for both to be represented in a single constituency dual seat of the legislature to accommodate both majority and minority views from the constituency. In my previous presentation on this subject, I submitted that party politics in its present form has been a source of terrible disharmony in several African countries. But party politics can be very beneficial for socio-economic development if it is structured and practiced in an inclusive and consensual manner. In most African countries, the opposition and minority parties virtually have no chance of coming into power, irrespective of their competences and capabilities. And it is mainly because of the religious factors and a shared disrespect on the part of the actors for the values and principles of party politics. The various sharp divisions and frictional fault dimensions along religious lines, ethnic lines, linguistic lines, and socioeconomic lines prevalent in our societies called for structural transformation that will always build consensus in our political engagements so as to reduce conflicts and disharmony in our countries. The current design of the divisive, exclusive, and adversarial hyper-partisan politics thrives on competition, confrontation, and conflict. It polarizes society. The first past the post and the winner-take-all politics are unduly polarizing and adversarial. The minority inclusive model, which is an inclusive and accommodating system, embraces consensus, consultation, and cooperation. This unites our society rather than divide us. The minority inclusive model promotes a political system that will guarantee the opposition and minority the possibility and opportunity to share power and thereby vitiate the incessant resolve of the opposition and minority to destabilize the ruling executive and the government of the day in an attempt to rise to power. And as such an arrangement, any time the government initiates policies, programs, and projects, the opposition and minority will be constructively critical and progressively supportive because the system guarantees their active participation in government and the control of power. The majority party, absolute control of executive government, and the majority party continual hold on power influences most opposition and minority parties to often work against the incumbent and wish the incumbent ill, which often tend to undermine the state in a quest to facilitate the rise to power of the opposition and minority parties. The fear of the exploitation of resources, ideas, policies, programs belonging to the opposition and minority parties, and the fear of opposition and minority parties and their resources being used and transformed into political capital to favor the incumbent government to perpetuate their stay in power often prevents the opposition and the minority parties from giving out their best contribution to support nation building. In most African countries, violence, the fear of violence, illegal election interference, and vote rigging has become a permanent feature of the election architecture. Hyperpartisanship, incumbent self-succession, and winner-take-all politics continually turns African people against each other, with one group of people fighting and degrading another group of people in their quest to gain political capital. In most African countries, there is too much to lose in continuing to maintain a system that often pitches brother against brother, father against son, mother against daughter, sister against sister, family members against each other, just to wrestle for political power. The consequence of this infighting and degradation among Africans is the retardation of the speedy development of African countries and the distraction of African countries from focusing their energies and resources on dealing with the serious internal and external challenges facing Africa. The infighting and degradation allows opportunistic external elements and exploitative foreign forces to manipulate African countries' internal divisions and weakness to exploit our resources. African countries must reform and embrace a new political arrangement, such as the minority inclusive model, that will provide avenues for societal vent by ensuring that new people, new ideas, new interests, new energy, new dynamics, innovation are continually brought to the fore to represent different segments of society and different interests of society through this new political model. African countries must reform and embrace a political system that will uphold the institutionalization of the minority inclusive model because it has inherent consensus building features. The people of Africa want a political system that will always share power among the majority and minority parties to build consensus and facilitate sustainable development. Most politicians in Africa, and for most African countries, the politicians tend to be more concerned about how they can get into power or retain power indefinitely than how they can organize society to produce genuine, substantial improvement in the lives of our people. Most politicians are more concerned with how they will destroy their opponents, politically, materially, and even if the need arises physically, to get into power or retain power, which often leads to human rights abuses, crises, coup d'etats, and even wars in some instances. The desire of the president to cling to power by any means necessary, even when he or she has lost confidence and support of the electorate, does give rise on most occasions to human rights abuses, crises, coup d'etats, and wars. The response from the opposition and the minority, who employ all fair and foul means to destabilize the presidency and the government of the day, do also fuel some human rights abuses and conflicts. Under the minority inclusive model, the guaranteed opportunity for the majority and winning party to share power with the minority and opposing parties will transform the activities of the election years to become incident-free. The guaranteed opportunity for the members of the minority or the opposition to share power and be in government would remove the key to a lot of the troubles in African politics, especially the unusual desire by the opposition to get into power by any means necessary, and the burning passion of the party in power to prevent this from happening. African countries have been left behind by the rest of the world because of instability, insecurity, and underemployment arising out of hyperpartisanship, divisiveness, confrontation, and conflict that is gradually becoming a permanent feature of African countries. African countries are too far behind on the development ladder to continue to allow hyperpartisanship, divisiveness, confrontation, and conflicts to distract our attention and dissipate our energies and misapply our resources, instead of pulling together and focusing on our developmental agenda. Minority inclusive model, as I said in my earlier presentation, will successfully thwart the practice of excluding the losing groups from power for longer periods. The minority inclusive model will automatically bring to the fore new people, new ideas, new energy to propel Africa's development. The minority inclusive model will always sustain consensus, given that consensus democracy is inherently more democratic as a result of its inclusive character, and it is also more conducive to political stability. The winner-take-all arrangement has inbuilt polarization and adversarial mechanisms, which automatically triggers conflict within the political system. African countries must reform and establish systems of government that have sustainable modifications. African countries need systems of government that have both the majority party and the minority party all represented in the executive branch and in the legislative arm of government at the same time. Exclusion from government power is not only unfair to losing groups, but in the long run also dangerous for winners and hence losers alike, since the losers may continue to undermine the legitimacy and stability of the democratic regime. The minority inclusive model, as I continue to submit, and the inclusive dual representation per constituency model, as I presented earlier, must be the way forward for African countries. We, the African people, are now agitating for a political system that replaces the undemocratic system of principle of exclusion with an inclusive political arrangement. This is the reason why I continue to champion the minority inclusive model as the surest bet to guarantee peace, security, stability, sustainable development, and economic growth for African countries and people. And this is the reason why you, and I, and all African people must work strenuously to reform Africa, to move Africa to the next level.